Hi there, everybody. I'm Tom Clary, host of the Clarified Realty Podcast. It's getting towards the end of the year, and both Ron and I are taking a bit of a break to enjoy our Christmas holiday and the New Year. I've already started my time off, so I'm just kind of taking a little moment while everyone's asleep in the house. Not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse, to introduce this episode and let you know what's up. So we thought it would be a fun idea to take a little look back at 2017 and the first year of our podcast, sort of a best of some of our favorite podcast episodes. There's been so much great information and some really incredible guests. So for the next 2 weeks, we're going to be putting together some of our favorites, some really interesting, informative segments. So I thought it'd be fun if we started off this recap of last year with how everything started. A piece from our first episode. This was the first part of our manifesto, as you were, of how we really wanted to connect with you guys and let you know what we were trying to achieve, to let you all know that real estate is nothing to be afraid of, and that the more you know, the less frightened you are. After that, there'll be a bit of a segment with CPAs extraordinaire, Steve Landsman and Vahan Papyan, talking about freelancers and how they can conquer their specific blocks that get in their way when they go to purchase their homes. After that, one of our most popular episodes was with Ian Mayer of I Am Home Inspections. So we'll give you a little taste of that. And last but not least, a final rant from yours truly, talking about taking your own destiny into your own hands. So without further ado, this is how it all started. Cue the drums.
You're going nowhere. Don't blame me for what you've done, because I know that you are having fun.
Welcome to the Clarified Realty Podcast, exposing the real estate secrets your agent doesn't want you to know. Here's your host, Tom Clary.
Don't you just walk away. When I'll say.
Hi there, and welcome to our inaugural podcast, Clarified Realty Episode 001. We're so happy that you took the time to give us a listen. I'm hoping that we'll have some great adventures ahead of us, and we'll be able to learn a lot about the great big world of real estate together. Some introductions are in order. My name is Tom Clary. I'm a licensed real estate agent here in the state of California. My practice is located specifically in the beautiful San Fernando Valley. I'm a Valley boy, born and bred. And while I handle real estate transactions in pretty much all areas of Los Angeles, downtown, Hollywood, this is really my specialty. I work with both buyers and sellers, and my office is located in the Tony and prestigious enclave of Calabasas, California. You might know it as the home of a Kardashian or two. And it's pretty much the Beverly Hills of the Los Angeles suburbs. Joining me today and on the rest of our podcast will be my friend, sidekick, and amazing lender, Ron Bruno. Hi there, Ron. Why don't you give us a little about yourself?
Tom, thank you so much. My name's Ron Bruno. I'm with the firm Guaranteed Rate here in beautiful Pasadena. I'm a Chicago guy originally, born and bred. My family moved when I was 7. Grew up in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, nice little resort town. And as my wife likes to say, I'm a cabana boy. So she married a cabana boy. It is true.
It happens.
It is true.
The dream happens.
It does happen, exactly. Went to college, Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, and moved out here 14 years ago.
Wow, you've been here a while.
I've been here for a while. I moved originally for a girl and stayed for the weather.
Well,
yes.
Understandable. Sometimes the girls change.
It's true.
The weather here in California relatively stays the same.
It's true. And my professional background, for the first 10 years, I was in various realms in sales and marketing. My first job actually was advertising.
Okay.
And I've been in personal finance and professional services for over 8 years now, starting in wealth management and moved over to the wonderful world of residential lending.
Awesome, Ron. Well, and we'll be going more in depth with Ron in our upcoming podcast number 002, where we'll be taking more of a deep dive into mortgages and how they are really the first signpost on our trip up the mountain of home ownership. Yes, even before talking to a real estate agent like me. But for this episode, this is really going to be the two of us giving you a preview of what we're really trying to achieve here and give you an idea of what to expect moving forward. You know, when I first spoke to Ron about starting this podcast, I told him that I wanted to make sure that if we were going to to get together and talk to you guys once a week, to humbly request the gift of your very valuable attention, I wanted to make sure that we were saying something completely different. I wanted it to be something that had a completely different voice and point of view. It had to be nothing that you could hear on another real estate-centric podcast or any other real estate content. If you're going to take your very precious time to download this podcast, how could I just, give you information you could just hear in 100 of other places? And Ron and I really, talked about it, and I started circling around different concepts, and nothing we really came up was really clicking. So I thought about it, and I started thinking about all the clients I've worked with. Was there something about them that seemed to be a common thread? Was there something on either the buy side or the sell side that seemed to keep on coming up? And then it hit me that there was something that seemed to keep on coming up over and over. Every deal, for whatever reason, it just for some reason couldn't escape it. Every potential buyer I talked to was preoccupied with it. There was something here, and I thought, well, I could do something about that. And that thing that kept on coming back and back and back, fear. It's such a simple concept, but it seems to rear its ugly head constantly in real estate. I mean, everywhere I looked in my business, I saw it. Fear about timing, is now the right time to buy or sell, or should I wait until next year? Fear about inspections and disclosures. What if I buy this amazing house, but then I find out there's mold in the walls? It's the one thing that united all these deals, and it was an element of fear. And I could only imagine that this fear sets in even before the process gets started, before people even make the decision to buy or sell a home. It paralyzes them. They sit in their studio apartment all huddled up on the couch under a blanket saying, I sure would like to buy a house, but what's the best choice? Should I rent? Should I buy? What if I lose my shirt, like all those people did when the bubble burst? I'd love to start looking for a house, but then I'd have to talk to one of those awful real estate agents giving me a hard sales pitch, and I'm sure they won't leave me alone. Actually, that one is really a scary one. But look, don't get me wrong. All of these are valid concerns, but they shouldn't ever be fears. At the end of the day, buying or selling a home or a condo is not rocket surgery. Trust me, I've spoken or done transactions with agents that I would consider to be the absolute best and brightest agents in the business. I mean, the cream of the crop. And trust me, no one is mistaking them for Mensa members or Nobel laureates. If they can understand the process, so can you, right? So getting back to fear, look, let's take a look at a really good example. What do you think is the number one question I get asked over and over and over again as an agent? I mean, it's the first question anyone asks me when I walk into a party or some sort of networking event. Ron, you probably got the same story. What's the number one question you get asked whenever someone sees you that hasn't seen you for a while?
How's the market?
Yep. I mean, or is now a good time to buy? Or is now a good time to sell? I mean, am I right? I mean, it's sort of cliche.
It is. You get people asking questions about, where our rates are going. What's the Fed going to do? Is now the right time? Should we wait? Are we in a bubble?
Right. And its foundation is really coming from fear. It's coming from a place of either I could lose my shirt or, am I going to make some sort of mistake? So if someone comes up to me and asks me this, and I'm talking about a person that actually wants to buy. Right, not
somebody who's just kind of, waffling or whatever. They actually do want to buy, but they're asking this question seriously. What they're really saying to me is, listen, Tom, if I buy my house now, will I lose my money? Fear. That's what's really at the root of it. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. About 70 to 80% of agents are not going to be exactly forthcoming about it if the market isn't going that person's way. They're going to twist it and turn it in a way that still gets you hooked. So, seriously, what do you think they're going to say, right? You think they're going to go, I don't know if you, I hope you don't like that shirt you're wearing because you're going to lose it if you buy a house right now. No. They're going to say whatever they can to get you to sign on the dotted line, period. And they are everything I despise about this business, and I'm sure you despise it too. So that's why it's so important you can find an agent who you can trust. And we'll go into this more in depth in a future episode, ways to weed out the good agents from the bad. But right now, we're going to stay on topic about what the whole podcast is going to be about. So, and which is the fear. What can you do to reduce that paralyzing fear? Well, when I was in college at USC, I took what I guess could be considered a general philosophy course. We read Socrates and all the great philosophers, and I basically learned how to argue with people using the Socratic method, which pissed my parents off to no end, right? Because I'd come home and say, clean your room, and I'd say, is there really a room? But there's one thing that always stuck with me. In the class, we read one of these books. It was called The Protagoras by Plato. And I can't remember what the general gist of the whole thing was, but there was this one part that really stuck with me, and I think it's really important to this conversation. And in that part, Plato, he's writing as Socrates, but it's Plato, is convincing his disciples that the 5 important human virtues, there was courage, temperance, holiness, justice, and wisdom, are all just names for the same exact thing. And his disciples, they're go crazy. They disagree with him. Whoa, Socrates, how could these be the same things? How on earth could courage and wisdom be the same thing? That makes absolutely no sense. But then Socrates, or Plato, goes through and systematically proves it. If someone has knowledge of the battlefield, they in turn have courage. If they make themselves educated about successful tactics and successful strategies, they have courage. Or should we say a lack of fear, right? What Plato was trying to really teach us was that cowardice is really ignorance. And more importantly, even ignorance is cowardice. So
that's deep.
A little bit. I don't want to go deep. It's a little deep, but I'll tell you something. It struck me so hard, even when I was 18, that I still carry it around with me every single day. That basically, the more knowledge that I have, the more courageous I'm going to be. So anyway, if we look at real estate from this perspective, who do you think are the folks out there that aren't afraid? Well, it's the guy or girl with the most knowledge about the real estate market and real estate, period. They're the ones that have, taken the time to educate themselves. The person who understands the battlefield, as it were. They understand that fear keeps the scaredy cats on the sidelines while they jump in and they grab all the best deals. Look, after the crash, it's understandable that people got skittish. I get it. People watched as friends and family, lost their homes and lives were turned upside down. It only makes sense that there would be a level of fear when people thought about the possibility of re-entering the market. But here's the thing. There were a lot of people who took advantage of this. They sat back until everyone was so afraid to buy, and they swept in and basically bought everything with 4 walls, usually with cash. Now what do we have? Well, now there's still a lack of inventory out there. We went from months worth of shadow inventory just sitting there to basically being in the desert looking for an affordable glass of water. We're dealing with a housing shortage, at least here in Los Angeles and the San Fernando Valley, that has made home prices climb and climb. Sure, I'm starting to kind of see that stabilize a bit, but when things were all scary out there, there were very few people that came in, investors, that took advantage of that atmosphere of fear and ate our lunch. Look, I'm going to come right out here, and I'm going to let you know that I'm firmly in the camp of folks who believe that home ownership is a good thing. It would be sort of weird for a real estate agent to be bearish on home ownership. So, right? But, You buy a house, you keep it for a period of time, and you get more money than you started with. You can make changes and additions that add value. And historically, at least, we're talking about an asset that appreciates. It gets more valuable as time goes on. Not to mention, you don't flush your money down the toilet once a month in the form of rent. When you buy a home, the money effectively goes, theoretically, back into your pocket. I mean, yes, you need to come up with a larger portion of money to begin with in the form of a down payment, and the payment each month may be a bit more, but it's really hard to argue against the benefits.
You know, Tom, you bring up a really good point. And, you know, back when I was in the wealth management days, you know, I was in wealth management in 2008. You can believe that's when I actually got my start. So I timed that.
Jeez, you're old.
Absolutely perfectly. But what was really interesting is you saw people like Warren Buffett, and they saw companies and they saw stock where that company was on sale. So the value of that company didn't necessarily mean that it lost half the value. Japan, when they had the tsunami, the ETF for the Japanese economy didn't all of a sudden go away after the tsunami. And, you know, it just so happened the next day that ETF was down 25%. So real investors, they're looking at value when it's on sale. And they are, you know, just, you know, your wife, she goes to Bloomingdale's and sees something that's half off. Doesn't mean that, oh my gosh, you know, the value of that bracelet is now half of what it's worth. No, she sees it on sale. And that's what investors do. They see things that are on sale. And when it comes to real estate and when it comes to stock, there are a lot of people see it as it's all of a sudden worth half the value.
Yeah. And we'll go, I'm going to go into that in depth a little bit later on. And he's entirely right. I mean, let me get to that. But what I'm getting at is, well, look, I don't consider myself a conspiracy theorist at all, right? I don't own a tin foil hat to keep the aliens from talking to me. And I don't think there's a 1% that is doing all they can to keep the other 99% down, at least in any sort of organized way. But because of the scarcity and the scarce nature of real estate, we're fast becoming a nation of haves and have-nots. And when I say scarce, I mean there's only so much real estate out there, folks. Housing starts aren't what they used to be. Not a lot of new houses out there. Developers aren't building like they used to. And when they're building, it's predominantly rentals, right? That's important. That means there are less and less places to buy. And if you don't jump on the train that's speeding by, you might not ever be able to get on. When the economy was burning down and everyone else was grabbing their hats and heading for the door, a lot of very smart, informed people were running toward the fire and ended up making a lot of money in the process. They didn't let fear overwhelm them. And now they're in the catbird seat, holding properties that were worth more than they were worth even 2-3 years ago. All right. Even though you're not here when we're recording this, I can already hear a lot of you, and you're basically probably saying, "Hey, buddy, I'd love to buy a house, a condo, but I can't afford it. I don't have the down payment. I don't even make that kind of money to make a monthly payment in this market." I get it. I get it. But that's not what we're talking about here. And we'll go into depth in later episodes about how you can go from having zero in the bank to saving enough for a down payment, or how you can use a down payment assistance plan to purchase a home. Ron will definitely be talking about that later. But you can make it happen if you want to. But I'm not going to BS you. It's hard freaking work and takes a lot of sacrifice. But it's totally worth it.
So coming up next is part of our conversation with Steve Landsman and Vahan Papyan. This was a topic very near and dear to my heart. I'd spent many a year as a freelancer, as a visual effects producer for film and TV, and had run into many specific problems when I tried to purchase my own house. Later on, when I went into the real estate field, it was incredibly important for me to find a way to help those that were going through the same exact thing that I had gone through. Guys like Steve, Vahan, and my co-host Ron are important parts of that equation. Here's a little taste of episode 5, my interview with Steve Landsman and Vahan Papyan. I hope you find the information as useful as I did. Right. And like I've said, I wholeheartedly trust in these guys' talents, and I'm really excited about this, what we've got ahead of you. Before we get started, I sort of want to frame up for everybody what the topic is going to be today. Today is an episode that has a very personal side for me. Before I entered the vast wasteland that is the real estate business, I was a visual effects producer for film and TV. If anybody's interested, you can check out my credits on IMDb. You might notice a flick or two that you may have seen, I swear. But I had always had a love for real estate. I actually got my license while I was still producing. That's how much real estate meant to me. But it was also during that time that my wife and I, we tried to buy a house, and there was just one big problem. I was having a real problem getting approved for a loan because I was a freelancer. I would work on a project for 9 months a year, and then move on to the next one. Basically, the nature of the film business is that you go from job to job to job, movie to movie to movie, and it was incredibly hard for me to establish a work history, something that lenders could look at and say, "Oh yeah, he's stable, he's okay. We'll give him money." I had worked on 3 Academy Award-winning movies, for God's sake, and I still couldn't get a lender to take a chance on me. But luckily, I was finally able to get the job done. But it was a real pain point until we got it all worked out. So unfortunately at the time, I didn't have a great team around me like these guys. I was educated, but I didn't, quote unquote, know anything about how to overcome this issue. So now, later on in life, when I've put the glitter of Tinseltown, all the premieres and awards ceremonies behind me, I thought it would be a good idea to bring a team together that really specializes and focuses on folks in the same position, people who are freelancers, people who are self-employed, etc. So to show how they can avoid all the common obstacles that are put in their way when they have plenty of income, plenty of time spent employed, but still can't get approved to buy a house. And that's where these guys come in. They're experts on this. They really know how to get the job done, and that's what we're talking about today. So thanks again so much for coming. So let's kind of just. Let's start off at the very, very beginning. When you have a client basically walk into your offices and say, I want to buy a house, but I'm a freelancer, how do you as accountants approach and strategize that plan?
It's interesting, Tom, because you can get consumer credit so easily. It seems that if you have a mailbox, you can get thousands of dollars of student credit.
Sometimes not even that.
Credit or student loan credit.
Right.
And for real estate in the climate since the late 2000s, it's been tougher. With the financial meltdown, it's very, very difficult to get a loan, and it's more difficult to get a loan at a good rate,
right,
with good terms. So we assist clients in that. We have clients that are foreigners, clients that are just entering the job market, and clients that are maybe coming out of a marriage or other backgrounds where it's hard to document and prove income. A lender is looking for cash flow so that they can be repaid.
Yeah.
We all know that one bad loan can wipe out dozens and dozens and dozens of good loans. If you look at an interest rate at 3%, and if that loan goes bad, how many other 3% loans have to go well for a lender to even break even?
Right.
And lenders are not interested in breaking even. They want to make profits. So we want to position our clients to have tax returns and financial trails that are traceable and that make sense. Unfortunately, when you're earning income, to give a lender confidence, a lot of times there's a tax that has to be paid, and that's just the way it works.
Right.
So part of our job is to educate our clients, support our clients, and position them well. And as you mentioned, Tom, in your experience, for those that are not receiving regular W-2s, for those that are self-employed, or even getting partnership or S corporation income, which we call pass-through income, it's more difficult.
Right.
So typically, a couple years of good tax returns will position somebody to get a good loan. In addition to that, a down payment helps of at least 20%. It's sort of a gateway. Think of yourself trying to get into those clubs, and for waiting in line all night in the rain versus being in the VIP line,
Right.
we want to get you in the VIP line.
Got it.
So the start with is, do you have copies of 1099s? Do you have copies of other financial information? Are you organized? Can we put that together and then go to somebody like Ron, say, look, Ron, here's their recent history. Can you get us some information on their credit score? And can you get them a loan? This happens over and over again with single people, with non-married couples, and also with married couples. And the pride of home ownership, the tax-favored status of having a real estate deduction, and the ability to have total growth are what people are after. By total growth, you get the tax savings, and you get the increase in real estate appreciation.
Right. And we'll go a little bit more into depth a little bit later on in the podcast about that. So I want to hold off on that for just a second. But I'm going to throw this now to Ron. So Ron, we've now chatted with Steve about how he strategizes in order to get these people who have a tougher time getting into the loan. I mean, then they come to you. What is it on the lender side that basically can help them out?
Being prepared. And we've talked about this on previous podcasts, but the biggest thing is understanding, number one, Steve mentioned it, we're looking for cash flow and we're looking for consistency of income. So if you are self-employed, that's completely fine. And what we're looking at is we're going to go back 2 years and we're going to average that income if your income is going up. If your income is going down, then we're actually going to take that the previous year, which is lower, and that's the income that we qualify for. So having the conversation with your CPA early in the process helps, because they can then look at it and say, okay, you're going to buy a $500,000 home, but you're only showing $5,000 net income on your Schedule C. Well, that's not going to happen, right? So how are we going to put you in that right position? So I just had this pop up with a potential client where they were pre-approved with another lender, and they went in, they looked at the tax returns, they looked at the pay stubs, and sure enough, I went in and I looked at the tax returns, I ran their credit, and going off of their income, they didn't make it. However, 2016 is a whole nother year, and we're at the end of it. So he may be able to qualify next year. So being able to have those conversations before you file your taxes, right, that's when we can work together. And that's when the lender and the CPA, we can work together to achieve the objectives, because the CPA's goal in the whole world is to minimize the tax liability. Right. We're trying as lenders to show as much income to qualify. Right. So we need to get on the same page.
Counter to each other, exactly.
That's right. So we need to work on the same page for the client and their overall objectives.
Right. So before we even kind of go deeper into this whole process, why don't we kind of briefly chat about, look, I know that when I was feeling the frustration back then, I mean, there was the part of it that I was literally like, I don't even want to deal with this. Or I literally want to throw up my hands and say, okay, enough, I'm not. And, at that point, really the option is renting. You know what I mean? Because if you're going to, if you can't get into a home because you can't qualify for a loan, it's complete. The frustration is the only word I can come up with. But there are real positives about potentially purchasing a home. Like, why don't you go into kind of, Steve, why don't you kind of discuss some of the, just by purchasing a home, how it helps you on your taxes?
Thanks, Tom. Home ownership is something really special. And for the person in the right stage of their life, it's wonderful. It gives them a home, not a rental. It's their home. They can do whatever they want with it. Decorate the way they want. They can park what they want in their garage, and there's security financially in home ownership. And when you own a home, most people never want to go back to renting again. So in home ownership, to acquire a property, you want to be stable in your life. Real estate is basically an illiquid investment, and usually the seller pays the transaction costs on a transaction. So if you're going to go in, you should go in because it's the right time of your life, not to try and make a quick dollar. Right. You can make a quick dollar. We've all heard about flips, and for those of us in the profession, we've seen flips that flopped.
Of course.
In other words, there are so many outside considerations that an individual has no control over. Right. Prices can stay flat for long periods of time. They can go down steeply and quickly during adverse conditions. Right. For those of you that are around in the riots and the mudslides and earthquakes, those three events all happened within a short period of time, and prices were down. And then we saw with the financial recession. fortunately, here in Southern California, prices do rebound.
Yeah.
And
definitely. And let me just interject here really quickly. And one of the things that I keep on kind of reflecting back on is because I did go through the pain of getting my own home, and I actually happened to do it when we were in the middle of the crash. We were actually mid-crash, right? So I jumped just as the ground was falling out from underneath everyone. But luckily, I kept my head about me, basically. A lot of people didn't, and a lot of people saw the values just crashing and said, oh, I got to hit the parachute and jump. There's a power to holding. So my house still kept on going down with everybody else. But now, today, because I'm in Southern California, where there is still a scarcity and there's still, people want to live here, my home value has gone back up, and I've done extremely well for it. So there's a power to holding.
There sure is. Globally, people see Southern California as a first world area with third world prices still. We've seen what's happened in Vancouver,
oh my God, yeah,
Manhattan, London. And it's happening here too. We have a lot of foreign investors that come and buy single-family homes, and they hold it for investment.
Right.
So you're absolutely correct. For those of us just entering the home market, I'll let Vahan speak. He entered a few years ago. It's a challenge. It's exciting, and we're here, as Vahan mentioned, as your trusted advisors, to guide you through the process and to help you avoid the bumps. And what are the bumps? The bumps are lying on a loan application. You're going to sign a document that gives the lender the authority and ability to go to the IRS and get a copy of your tax returns. So if you submit a fraudulent tax return, not only is that a crime, you're likely to be caught.
It's going to hurt.
and with the electronic information available today, those things are hard to shake from your past. The other issue is getting the loan that's right for you. We know people that have interest-only loans, and there's people that get P&I loans. There's 15 years now. There's 30 years now. It's a great time to buy now, given the stability in Southern California. There's a lot more industry here. There's more people coming every year, and interest rates are still at historically low levels.
Right. I know that when new buyers purchase their first home, they're nervous and desperate to find a reliable, knowledgeable home inspector they can trust. Ian Mayer is definitely one of those guys. He really takes care with a home and goes the extra mile every single time. Climbing under the house, really investigating every nook and cranny. He puts a lot of care and expertise into his work, and his incredible collection of 5-star reviews is a testament to that. So we were lucky enough to have Ian come in and talk to us, and here's a little bit of our conversation with him. Ladies and gentlemen, from episode 6 of the podcast, part of my interview with Ian Mayer. Now, is there any kind of formal licensing, or what's in terms of or can anybody hang out a shingle and say, I'm a home inspector?
That's an interesting thing. That's a very misconception here in California. In California, there's actually no home inspector license. And a lot of people don't know that, because I can't tell you how many agents.
You would hope that there would be, but then it's you find out that there isn't.
Well, there's some pros and cons of that, because I talk to inspectors all over the country. But I was going to say, a lot of real estate agents will call me and say, well, are you licensed? I'm thinking,
what license are you talking about? Right.
I have a driver's license.
Yeah.
So the interesting...
By the way, that's a very good way to tell if it's a very inexperienced agent. I mean, if they're asking that question.
Yeah, but even agents have been around forever. It's a big misconception. But anyway, there's some pros and cons of this. The pros of being in an unlicensed state, because the inspectors who live in licensed states have this issue that licensing in most states is very minimal. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about your driver's license.
Right.
You get your driver's license at 16 or whatever. That doesn't mean you're a great driver. Doesn't mean you're an experienced driver. Doesn't mean you've ever been on the freeway.
Right.
But you have a license to drive.
Right.
And inspectors in other states where there is heavy licensing have sort of the same issue, is that you get a license, so now you're a licensed home inspector, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have any great experience at it. And the inspectors who've been doing it for a long time and are really experienced or really innovative kind of go, oh yeah, but now there's this new guy who just had a license yesterday, and now we're being viewed as the same on the same level.
Right.
Here in a state where we don't have licensing, it forces the consumer to really look a little deeper and not go, well, yeah, he's licensed, he must know what he's talking about. Like, and go, well, no, I need to really investigate, go to the website,
dig a
see
bit,
what's
bit
going
deeper.
on, dig a bit deeper, and kind of distinguish between, the guy who just started yesterday and the people who know what they're doing. On the con side is yes, anyone can just really open up a business and say I'm a home inspector, and if you go on like Craigslist, you see all these listings for like, why pay more? Home inspector, cheap, cheap, cheap. In the end, they're written in very poor English.
Yeah.
And these guys, they don't have insurance. They don't have the certifications. They may not belong to one of the major trade organizations. They may not have the schooling. And the really scary thing to me is when you do a Google search for a home inspector, all these ads will pop up on the side. You too can be a home inspector for 3 easy payments of $9.99. Study from home. I'm like, do you really want someone who studied from home for 3 easy payments of $99? Inspecting your house.
Yeah.
So there's that downside.
Right.
But if you do a good job and take the time to do the job right, you stand out.
Yeah. So there are different organizations, like we said, Internachi and what other kind of organizations, like what things that people can kind of look for to direct them that can help them out?
Well, there's 2 big groups, International Association of Home Inspectors, that's I belong to, the American Society of Home Inspectors, who I did my training through. There's also a California version that's just as California. And it is important that inspectors should belong to one of the trade organizations. The only thing as a caution is kind of like a license, though. Just because you belong, that's just a minimum. They all have minimum requirements, and if you go into home inspector forums, they'll sit there and argue till they're blue in the face about which one's best. I've been through all of them. They all have pretty much the same requirements. They all have the same standards, and it's kind of a minimal thing.
Yeah.
So, if you go on a lot of websites, say, well, make sure you always hire an inspector who belongs to one of the trade organizations, and I agree with that, but don't rely on that.
Right. Sure. Absolutely.
To me, I always say, look at the sample report. Go to the inspector's website, see if they have a sample report. If they don't, that's kind of one little red flag.
Yeah.
But if they do, download it and look at it and compare it.
Right.
Because, the inspector requirements are still minimal.
Right. Well, and I think we'll get to kind of what we look for on a report a little bit later on. But you were also, I think we've talked about this before, and you were saying that when you look at someone that you're considering to be your home inspector, that another thing that you might want to consider is you don't want the guy you think he's got all this experience, he's got like 20 years in the business or whatever like that, because he may not know the technology that's out there. That's right.
This came up to me. I got a call to inspect a house, so I went out there, and I said, "Yeah, this house was just recently inspected." And I thought, well, okay, that's interesting. Then why am I here?
Right.
And she says, "Well, do you want to see the report?" I'm like, "Okay." And she hands me this report, and it's just 50 pages of text. There's not a picture in it anywhere.
Oh, jeez.
And it's just block text. And she's like, "Yeah, well, the previous buyers, they hired this guy because he claimed he had 30 years experience." And I'm like, looking at the report, like, well, yeah, he did the report like he would have done it 30 years ago.
Right.
We have these things called cell phones, smartphones now. They have cameras on them. You can take pictures. We have software. I've got software as I go around the house. It takes pictures and inputs comments directly into what will be the report.
Right
on my phone. And, there's things like HD cameras. If there's a roof that's not safe to walk on, you can put an HD camera up there and shoot the roof.
I have actually seen some inspectors actually use FLIR, where they kind of to search for mold, basically.
Yeah, and then there's infrared cameras, which I have. So there's a lot of things that have been progressed in the inspection world in the last, 5 to 10 years. And, when I talk to guys who've been around for 20, 30 years, they're like, oh, I don't need all that. That's not how I did it 20 years ago. I'm like, well, that's fine, but does anybody do anything the way they did it 20 years ago?
Right, and you would hope that something has progressed and to actually bring more value, to the actual home inspection over the course of 20, 30 years. Yeah, you're taking pictures because then I know that as an agent on the other side, I can tell you how many times I have the other agent say, when we're in the middle of negotiations on, a request for repairs, and they say, well, send over the pictures. You know what I mean? And being able to have that and send it over to them and say, yeah, then look, look, there was a leak on the roof. We,
Right.
we took a picture of it. And then they go, oh, you can't really, it's hard for them to kind of argue when they, when they actually see it in their own two eyes.
And the other thing that came up was a very funny story. I was on an inspection with an agent who I thought had been around a long time. And he said something about the water meter. I said, oh, yeah, and there's a little leak by the water meter. And he walked over to the electrical panel and opened it up and said, so where's the leak? And then it just kind of occurred to me, like, a lot of people even people who've owned homes or bought homes, don't really understand a lot about what the home is. They just know they go through,
Right.
they open the front door, walk in, and that's it. And so I kind of realized, it's not just my job to point out the problems of the house. It's also my job to educate the consumer about what the house is,
right,
where the things are, and how it works.
And we're and here on the podcast, we're very much in about that the person who's potentially buying that home, they need to take responsibility for a lot of these things as well. I mean, at the end of the day, there's this kind of feeling of, oh, well, that guy didn't do that, or that guy didn't do this. But look, if you're not taking the time to sit down and actually read through the inspection report, actually understand what's going on with the home that you're purchasing, then I think you're actually complicit in what is could eventually go wrong. And you're at the end of the day, you have to own the process as well. So that's kind of one of the things that we kind of try to do here as well, is to tell everybody that they need to really start being involved in the process.
Yeah, I always encourage people to show up to the inspection. I get that question a lot. Should I be there? Well, of course you should be there.
Yeah, right.
And I mean, I know there are some inspectors out there who are like, well, I don't really want the client bothering me while I'm inspecting. I'm like, no, come along.
No.
Please, so I can point out things as I go.
Yeah.
Also, because there might be little quirks about the house that aren't necessarily wrong and aren't going to be in the report, but as long as you're here, I can point them out to you.
Yeah.
So I encourage people to come with me and follow me around.
Yeah. So, so we said that licensing is it's non-existent here in California, but you would want them to be insured, though, right?
Yeah, well, because there's no license, there's no requirement for insurance. But obviously, there's the home inspector insurance out there. We have E&O insurance, much like a real estate agent would. So, that's something you should definitely look for and ask.
Any kind of in terms of how much or whatever they.
I don't know. I don't think there's a real issue on that. But sometimes when you when you see the inspectors on like Craigslist advertising these ridiculously cheap prices, realize, well, they're cheap because they're not paying for insurance.
Right. They probably don't have that to cover themselves.
They don't have the cost and the expense that a legitimate full-time inspector would have.
Right. So let's say that I'm doing my digging, I'm doing my investigating. My agents referred me someone. I've looked on Yelp. I found people with high rankings and all that kind of thing. And I deep dive. I go onto their website, and there's an example of one of their reports. What should I be looking for? Like what should I say? Oh, this guy is probably what Ian is talking about.
There's several things. First off, hopefully it's computer generated. Back in the old days, reports were paper. There was triplicate paper, and guy rocked around and made some scratch marks on it, and kind of like the doctor's note. Good luck reading it. We have progressed to computers. I think 99% of inspectors out there use a computer now, although there are still old guys hanging on to the paper way. I was listening to an inspector podcast the other day with someone who was still bragging that they use paper. And I was like, what? That's something to brag about. The other thing is definitely, aren't there pictures in the report? Just because, a Word document doesn't necessarily contain pictures.
Right.
There should be pictures in the report. And I know some inspectors, they get away with, they take pictures, but they put them all at the end of the report.
Right.
Or they give them to you separately from the report. And you have to sit there and
compile it somehow, right?
And that drives me crazy.
Right.
I would definitely think, the picture should be with, the list, just the list of what.
If it's talking about the plumbing, it should be with the plumbing.
Right.
The pictures should be right there.
So you want to look.
So you
don't
have to go digging.
Which with modern inspection software is really easy.
Shouldn't be a problem.
It shouldn't be a problem, but there's a lot of guys who still don't do it. The other one, and some inspectors will disagree with me with this, but I believe in narratives and not just check boxes.
Right.
A lot of reports you see, they're just checking a box.
Yeah.
Yep. There's a wall. Check. Like, what does it tell you anything?
Right.
And that's why some inspectors, they go through the whole house in an hour because they just go around and check a bunch of
Right.
boxes and then they're gone. And like, well, that doesn't tell you anything.
Right.
So you want to see a report where, hopefully there's no check boxes and someone's taken the time to, type out.
Yeah. And I'll tell you from an agent standpoint, how important that is as well, is that when, like I've said, we go to our negotiations for our request for repairs, the more information that we have that we can point at and say, look, this is what the inspector is saying, other than, leak in water pipe or whatever, you know what I mean? It always gives us, because at the end of the day, we've got to tell a story. We have to be able to go there and our negotiation and tell a very clear, concise story. And the more information we have always helps with that.
I agree. That's why I don't do check boxes, and I do narratives, and I try to make them as detailed as possible. So you have something,
Do you usually in your reports give how to resolve the issue, or is it more of just, no, this is the issue?
Well, there's a little bit, you refer it to, the specialist.
Right.
If it's an electrical issue, get an electrician. If it's plumbing issue, get a plumber.
Right. Right. So it'll be more like, talk to this guy.
Right.
Got it. What else?
The other thing is a decent length. This is something that comes up on inspector forums. You see there's an argument on how long should the report be, and I've seen a few inspectors advertise, well, if your report's not 50 pages, you're not getting your money's worth. I'm like, okay, then you go look at their sample report, and a lot of it is fluffed out or a lot of blank pages, and they're stretching it out to make 50. And like if you're doing a small house,
that's like what I used to do with my term papers in college.
Right.
It's like
to me, the house signifies how long the report's going to be.
Sure.
I mean, if it's a small house that's been very well taken care of, it may only be 20, 30 pages. If it's a large house and it's got a lot of issues, it may be 60, 70 pages.
Right.
I had an agent came up to me the other day and says, yeah, I got this report from this other inspector and it's like 120 pages.
Ooh.
And I'm like, okay. And that's nice detail, but are you really helping the consumer at that point? Because who's going to sit there and read all 120 pages?
Jeez.
I mean, yes. So you've got to find a sort of a sweet spot between, not too
Well, it's
short.
probably the illusion of detail at that point too. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's not really going to help anything in terms of, yeah, if I have to spend 3 hours, I know as an agent I'd be banging my head against a wall, but especially if it's like a condo, it's like a 1-bedroom condo. Here's your 150-page report.
Yeah. So you see that, but I also heard inspectors, well, my reports are never more than 10 pages long. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Well, you're not really helping anyone else.
That's not enough either.
There's some actual trainers out there who will say, well, your home inspection report should never contain more than 18 pictures.
Really?
And I'm like, but it's so easy.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, who's got the time for that? Well, you don't have the time for your client. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Really. So, anywhere 30 to 50 pages, I think, is probably adequate for the average house. I mean, definitely if it's got a lot of issues, my reports can get longer.
Yeah.
But, so you want to see something long enough to tell you what you need to know, but not so long that you're being drowned in minute details that aren't going to matter.
Right. Right. So I thought I'd end our first look back at 2017 with a bit of one of my infamous podcast rants. When we first released this episode of the podcast, episode 7, the country had just been through one of the most, if not the most, polarizing elections we'd ever experienced as a nation. Other real estate professionals were falling all over themselves trying to guess what this new presidency would mean to real estate. Only problem was there was no way any of them could ever know what was going to happen at that point. So not a single one, but more disturbing for me was that what I was feeling coming from a good portion of the public. It was this overwhelming feeling of helplessness, that things were drastically, almost completely out of their control. I don't believe that. I really don't. I truly think that who the president is or isn't has very little to do with everyone's everyday lives. And there is an epidemic of folks using this perceived helplessness to excuse procrastinating on making very important decisions, like buying a house. I hope you'll give this a listen and then go back and download the full episode when you have a chance. I think it's really worth your time to hear the whole thing if you haven't already. Without further ado, a clip from The Fallacy of Hopelessness, Episode 7 of the Clarified Realty Podcast. So we just had the election about a month or so ago, and unless the Electoral College has anything to say about it, we're now looking at about 4 years at least of a Donald J. Trump presidency. Everyone is asking me what a Trump presidency is going to mean to real estate, and will things get better? Will they get worse? Well, I'm going to come right out and give you guys the best answer I can. So this is probably something you want to get a pen and a piece of paper for to write this down. You'll definitely want to have this written down someplace. So I'll go ahead and wait. Go ahead and get your pen and pencil. All right, you guys ready? All right, okay, you ready? Good. The answer is, who the hell knows? Seriously, who the heck knows? This guy's about as predictable as a lotto machine, for God's sake. Is he the guy that says he's going to kill Obamacare? Or is he the guy that says he's going to look into it and consider it very carefully? Is he the guy that wants to build a wall? Or is he the guy that just, he's just fine with half a fence? Is he the guy that's going to register all the Muslims and throw out all the undocumented immigrants? Maybe he is. Is he the guy that's going to, quote unquote, drain the swamp and then goes on to hire every last alligator in Washington to be in his cabinet? Sure looks like that's what's happening, but your guess is as good as mine. At the end of the day, what he said is meaningless, because when it comes down to it, this guy, he's a salesman first. He's the salesperson's agent's spirit animal. He's going to say whatever the guy or girl that's directly in front of him wants to hear, and it changes from conversation to conversation. Millions and millions of people across the country, rally after packed rally, bought what he was selling. And what was he selling exactly? Donald J. Trump, of course. Making America great again. Making America great again. I mean, what the hell does that even mean? Can you be more ambiguous, more non-specific? I mean, this isn't a Republican or Democrat thing at this point. All that stuff doesn't even matter. That's just what colored jersey your team is wearing. We're in a whole new territory of complete upside down world here. How could you ever confidently say anything about what the hell the future holds? What you bought on the factory floor ain't what you're driving home, trust me. You got duped. And unfortunately, there ain't no cooling off period for electing a president. No money back guarantee. I mean, who knows what his real agenda is? We're not going to be able to see that until we watch his actions after the inauguration. Until then, anything is possible. And maybe then, who knows? And by the way, seriously, if anyone out there, be it a WA, a weak agent, or an SA, a salesperson agent, gives you an answer, you look them straight in the face and you tell them it's BS. If they say anything, if they make one stupid, dumbass prediction, it will out them as the charlatans I've always warned you about. They are talking directly out of their ass, and they should be called out as such. There's only one specific thing that we've seen already as a result of Trump being elected. Well, pretty much so. I mean, we're kind of expecting it anyway, but that's that interest rates are going up. They finally made the move above 4%. That's what we kind of already been expecting. So other than that, that's the only thing that we've seen happen for sure. Everything else is up for grabs. But, that being said, hey, I mean, I've got some time to kill. This podcast is about an hour long, so if you're a fan of unsubstantiated conjecture and wild postulations, here are some of the best guesses that at least I'm seeing. Now, I would take all of these with a grain of salt the size of the Empire State Building, but all right, you ready? Here it goes, all right? Assuming Trump is actually a Republican, which is, I guess, sometimes up for debate, then working together with the Republican Congress, you're probably going to see a decrease in regulation in the lending world. And I would assume the repeal of, or at least the very least, changes to Dodd-Frank. Dodd-Frank was a regulation on the banks after the crash to make sure they stayed healthy. Because of Dodd-Frank, a lot of smaller community banks have been forced to keep a certain amount of money on hand to make sure that they don't go under. So basically, it's a stress test. So if this gets lifted, they'll have a lot more money on hand to make loans for developers to construct more homes. More inventory means that prices should start to stop their climb. Look, how would I feel if this happened? Look, I'm not a big fan of overregulation. But we all remember what happened in 2008 when the banks were allowed to, basically play fast and loose with all the rules. I don't know. I might get a little nervous. But like I said, who knows? The next one is Forbes.com says that if we see the tax cuts Trump promised in his campaign, there'll be at least a temporary stimulus to the economy. That might be nice. More people are going to get out there in the market with a bit more money in their pocket. That could mean more jobs and more tax revenue, from those newly employed people. That being said, when the GDP, when it starts to rise, we might see an uptick in inflation. And with that, higher interest rates. But here's the kicker. If the GDP doesn't continue to rise, we'll have a larger, meaner budget deficit issue because, remember, the government is taking less taxes, and that could force interest rates even higher. That's no bueno for the real estate market. And by the way, if you combine these 2 points about less regulation and there being potentially less taxes in the coffer if the GDP doesn't rise like it should, we know what happened back in 2008 when banks were allowed to play fast and loose with the rules. You combine that with a federal government with no money to bail them out if things get ugly, we're talking a recipe for disaster. There is one positive for the removal of regulation. That's the possibility that there might be a loosening of regulations on zoning and land use. Getting around this stuff has been very expensive for developers, and they pass the pain on down to you in terms of higher housing prices. So maybe we'll see prices on new construction come down a bit, but I wouldn't hold my breath. Also, Forbes.com said that because of what they said past sins, quote unquote past sins, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac may not survive. You might remember from our previous conversation with Ron that these are 2 government-sponsored entities that provide government guarantees on mortgages, basically making them a lot less expensive for buyers to get. Even though both of them have paid back all of their bailout money, they made some really bad decisions during the bubble, and some Republican politicians they may want to make an example of them. If that happens, Forbes was saying that 30-year fixed-rate mortgages are going to go the way of the dodo. Think about that. I mean, the single most stable mortgage product you can obtain would just disappear. The effect on the market would be dramatic, if not catastrophic. And here's a fun one. We all know by now that our future president believes that climate change science is just a fiction created by the Chinese to get ahead of us. Well, in a recent New York Times article, they said because of rising sea levels around the world, it sounds like more and more buyers are looking to avoid buying houses in coastal zones. Basically, the market might be about to fundamentally change. It was always originally thought, I mean, it's always been the conventional wisdom that the prime property was always on the beachfront with an ocean view. Well, maybe not so much anymore. I mean, don't get me wrong, that house on Malibu Beach that you saw on TV didn't just, get a $5 million discount, but buyers are they're being more and more cautious that their beachside homes aren't going to end up in the middle of the Pacific. To quote the Times that said, quote, some analysts say the economic impact of a collapse in the waterfront property market could surpass that of the bursting dot-com and real estate bubbles of 2000 and 2008, end quote. So our president-elect just selected Scott Pruitt, a climate science denier, to be head of the EPA, so I'll leave it to you to see if this problem is going to get better or worse under his administration. So if I had a crystal ball, these are some of the predictions I might be making. But guess what? I don't believe in effing crystal balls. I don't. I mean, tea leaves or tarot cards. So there you go. Take that information, leave it. I don't know. We'll see if any of it actually comes true. But here's what I do want to talk about. There's a great big freaking elephant in the room with tiny little hobbit hands. There's no way to look at Trump and say with any certainty his administration is what it's going to do. Or maybe he is going to do exactly what he said on all of his stump speeches. I mean, that would be horrifying and next to impossible, especially where a 1,500-mile wall is concerned. But who knows? And don't get me wrong, I am firmly in the camp that Trump won the election. Our system is about the Electoral College, and he won it. That is not debatable, period. He will be my president. Yes, you heard me right. My president. None of this, not my president stuff for me. To paraphrase my parents, when I was growing up, if you want to live under America's roof, you have to follow America's rules. But yes, Donald Trump will be my president for the next at least 4 years, maybe 8. You know, or even longer if the conspiracy theorists are right. But you can't ignore that more than half the people in America who actually got out and voted didn't even vote for him. And when you add that with the uncertainty of the things I've talked about who Trump really is, the dramatic increase in hate crimes over the past few weeks, the general feeling that what Americans have always been taught, that it's one person and one vote, it's an absolute lie. That their votes counted less just because they lived on the coast instead of Wisconsin. Come on. There's a growing feeling of helplessness amongst a great many people out here in America. Those people that you saw marching and protesting in the street, they're not marching about sour grapes or being bad sports. They don't need you to call a wham-ambulance or for you to hand out pacifiers. They're truly afraid for their well-being. They really and truly feel that they've lost any semblance of control over their lives. But here's what I'm here to tell everyone. Nothing could be further from the truth. There is nothing ever to be gained by feeling helpless or complaining or having a victim mentality. And I'm seeing this reaction to the election as a perfect example of this. All the wailing and gnashing of teeth, for all the things I've mentioned above, I get it. There are plenty of totally understandable reasons, but honestly, not a single excuse. I really think that we've all sort of become addicted to helplessness in this country. And it's not about entitlement I'm talking about. That's something completely different. I think that we use helplessness as an excuse to stay stagnant, to keep the status quo. Look, ultimately, you're the person who makes your own way in life. You're in charge of your own destiny. No change in who the president of the United States is should ever change that. If you think that, you're thinking way too macro. You're thinking way too big. Will it have an impact on you? Sure it will. Will it be the thing that stops or starts you from doing what you want to do in your life? Chances are probably not. I don't believe that. Even President Obama said in an interview in Rolling Stone, he said, quote, "There's no benefit that's derived from pulling up into a fetal position," end quote. You should be the master of your own life. As a matter of fact, spending time being preoccupied by lack of control over things, which are completely out of your hands, can actually distract you from doing things that could very easily put you in a much better situation. And I might even argue that most of the time, you're swerving into that feeling of a helplessness in order to delay making actual definitive decisions or taking actual action to make a different outcome for yourself. Because staying in the same place, there's a real safety there. You know where you're at, right? It's the warm water. Making some sort of decision or move is dangerous. I mean, what if you make a mistake? But here's the thing. Sure, you might make a mistake, but what if you don't? Heck, there's probably a better chance that you won't. And then you've completely missed out on a potentially better future for yourself. You wouldn't want to do that, would you? Well, that's about it for today. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to leave them for us on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Clarified Realty Podcast, all one word. If you have any questions about real estate or you're looking for someone to help you buy or sell a home, remember, I'm actually a licensed real estate agent. I'd love to help you out. So please email me directly at tom@clarifiedrealty.com or give me a call at 818-335-7662. Don't be shy. Come on, guys, give me a ring. For more exclusive bonus content and advice between episodes, please check out our website, www.clarifiedrealty.com. Also on our homepage, you'll find links to helpful buyer and seller guides that can give you some great information for starting your home buying or home seller process, so definitely check those out. Here's a new thing. We actually have an Alexa skill, so search the Alexa store for the Clarified Realty Podcast. Add our skill to your daily briefing and get a dose of real estate news and tips every day of the year. Definitely give it a try. It's pretty cool. I'm on Snapchat, Twitter, and Instagram as well. My handle for all three of those are @ClarifiedRealty. Please leave feedback and reviews on iTunes or in the comment section on our page. Together we're stronger, so if you have any questions or ways that we can make this podcast better, please let us know. My amazing theme song, Hey Now, is from the band Wolf. That's Wolf with 2 Fs. And please go check them out and like them on SoundCloud. And just a little disclaimer, I'm licensed by the California Bureau of Real Estate. My license number is 017153353. Ron's is?
Guaranteed rate, NMLS 2611, NMLS ID 558706, California and Texas.
The advice we give is only for properties located in the state of California. For all other states, please contact your local real estate agent or real estate professional. Well, that's about it. Ron, you all good?
I'm good.
All right. Well, thanks for coming by, everybody. And remember, the greatest thing you can ever do is make someone feel at home. Take care. We'll see you next week.
What you gonna do with your life?